Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Greetings, world. You listen to yours truly, Chrissy B. Imhotep. Some just simply call me Chrissy B. I'm here to talk about the legendary Sir Coxsone Dodd of Studio One Records, the founder of Studio One Records. Sir Coxsone Dodd was born this day, which is January the 26th in 1932 in Kingston, Jamaica. And I'm here at the Coxsone Lounge invited by his daughter, Morna Dodd, to play a set in tribute to him later on downstairs. I'm upstairs in the hotel room as I speak to you right now. Coxsone Dodd was a very, very lovely man. Coxsone Dodd gave many artists an opportunity to record in Jamaica in the early days of Jamaican recordings. You know, the Jamaicans were listening to jazz musics early out. People like Louis Prima, people like Louis Jordan, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, just to name a few of the artists and of the jazz artists that the Jamaicans were listening to in the 1930s and the 1940s, and then they became their own icons and legends from the 50s when they started to record local recordings for sound systems. Of course, Sir Coxsone Dodd was one of the pioneers of sound system operators, along with the likes of Drew Creed, Tom the Great Sebastian, and others, just to name a few. And Coxsone Dodd really went into recording in 1959 when somebody had said to him that, you know, you could start making local records, you could start producing local artists and put them onto racks. And then he never thought it was a viable business idea. He thought that these records would just be short-term fixes. But when he recorded some local artists, one of the earliest sessions, in actual fact, it's noticed as possibly the first commercial session, Easy Sapping by Philly Beckford, and Alton Ellis alongside Eddie Perkins. Alton and Eddie, aka, which was a big duo in those days, recorded a Muyo in 1959, and then after that it became a phenomena. And after that, recordings galore took place. Not just Coxsone Dodd, but people like Drew Creed, Leslie Kong came afterwards, King Edwards, Prince Buster, and throughout the 60s and 70s and beyond, Jamaican recordings have been there in great supply and great abundance. But Coxsone Dodd was really the founder and the pioneer, because he was the first. Some say he was the first black man to have his own studio, but records say that the great Lyndon Pottinger, who was the husband of the equally great Sonia Pottinger, the first female producer on the island of Jamaica, was the first black man to have his own studio in the 1950s. And Coxsone Dodd came along with Studio One, which he formed in 1961, going into 1962 at number 13 Brentford Road, Kingston. And it was a nightclub called The End. And when Coxsone went in there, he saw an opportunity to record. And then he just took it on himself to purchase the building, moved in, and started playing and recording local talent. But as I said before, at that time it was only really done for local sound, which was he was one of the sound system operators, because he'd owned a sound system by the name of Sir Coxsone's Downbeat. He was given the name Coxsone by his friends and followers because he loved cricket, and of course there was a famous cricket player in years gone by the name of Coxsone, so they just gave him the name of Coxsone as in tribute to this particular cricketer who Coxsone liked, and also because Coxsone was a great cricket player and a cricket fan also. And his name was also Downbeat as well, given by his followers. So he had a sound system called Coxsone's Downbeat. At one stage in Kingston alone, Coxsone had 5 sound systems running at once. But they toured around the island of Jamaica, and in some cases went to various other parts of the Caribbean, I was told as well. In those days, you had selectors, but in the 1950s, Coxsone Dodd went to America on farm work. In actual fact, the Jamaican government allowed a lot of Jamaicans to go to Florida and New York on farm work, where they would work on, the farms out there, plantations, and do farm work and so on, agricultural work. And Coxsone Dodd, along with the likes of Drew Creed, Tom the Great Sebastian, sometimes Prince Buster as well, will go out there and also use it as an excuse to pick up the latest R&B jazz records, because those are the days of R&B. People like Louis Jordan, people like Nat King Cole, just to name a couple. Roscoe Gordon is another name there, and some of also the jazz records and blues records as well. B.B. King, and so on. Fats Domino, just to name a few names. And they'd use it as an excuse to go out there, purchase these records, bring it back to Jamaica, play in their sound system as exclusives, and it was certain that the crowd's wild. But the significant part of this was in the late 1950s. Coxsone one day, in one of these ventures out to America, heard an announcer on the radio give some drive in how he was selecting the records on the radio. An example of what I'm talking about was something like, if this particular radio announcer was flipping records, he would say something like, "Oh, play it back twice on the track," and something like that, or hit me back, Jack, on the track. Words like that. Like some sort of drive talking took place. And Coxsone had heard this, and he was really mesmerized by this. And he said, "Oh, that's quite. I've never heard that before." So when he went back to Jamaica from this particular venture, he went back to Jamaica, and he had two selectors. He had the first selector was Count Machuki, then the second selector was King Stitt. And he told King Stitt and Count Majuki what he heard on the radio, and he was demonstrating it to them, using the drive talking he heard. And so what happened was King Stitt and Count Majuki twisted it around and said, "Okay, we could work with that." And they added their own, as time went on, added their own peps, their own driving. Also, there was a magazine, a very popular magazine in Jamaica by the name of Swing Magazine. And in that magazine, there was lots of nursery rhymes, which was published. Nursery rhymes also, believe it or not, certain types of jive talking and rhymes and slangs and so on. And Count Majuki would buy this magazine on a regular basis, and it would sharpen him up. He would say, "Okay, then I'm going to twist that around and twist this around," and it gave him lots of ammunition to use as going forward as a selector. So now going to the sound system dancers, you had spices, because not only did you hear the music, you heard for the selectors, the disc jockeys and the sounds, i.e. in this case Count Majuki and King Stitt started to, but was announcing records. Before they put a record on, they'll give a jive, then maybe in between the records they'll give another jive, and when the record is finished they'll give some more jive again. Later on, then Euro started to adapt this, and then Euro became, of course, like a disciple of both King Stitt and Count Machuki. But Euro says that Count Machuki was his biggest inspiration, because he said when he went to the sound system dances, the Coxsone Dodds sound system dances, when he heard Count Machuki announcing records and using the drive, it inspired him to want to become a DJ himself. And then, of course, you see, the rest is history. Probably they call him the grandfather or the godfather of DJ, and the teacher, the originator. He's got so many titles. And so, and there you have it. But it was really exciting in those times. We had dances at places like Foster's Hall in Kingston, Milk Lane, Luke Lane, so many other venues. The Ward Theatre as well was another prestigious venue that sound system dances, led by the likes of Coxsone, Dodd and Drew Creed and Tone for Great Sebastian, took place. There was other sound systems like Meritone, but Meritone played a lot of soul music as well, and you had others. And then in England, you had people like Duke Vin, who actually inspired Coxsone Dodd to have his own sound system. Duke Vin was in Jamaica, but he came to England in the early days. He came to England in the 50s, and he was the first. I believe he was the first sound system operator in England in around 1956-57 time. And then Duke Vin, I believe he died a few years ago, but he has a massive... he's one of the icons. He's like the pinnacle. Then you had people like Sir Lloydie Coxsone International, Fat Man. These guys came after the likes of the great Duke Vin, Metro, and others. But Coxsone at Studio One was really, really great, because his mother Doris, Mrs. Darlington, was there, and she helped him with the building of the sound system. Coxsone has gone on record as many times as saying that if it was for his mother, he didn't know how he would start, because his mother was very supportive, gave him all the drive, all the things he needed, all the ingredients, all the encouragement he needed to set the studio up, as well as the sound system, to set the studio up. Because like I say, before he went there, it was a nightclub. And then later on, you had the likes of the Scatterlights who came there. Scatterlights were more or less formed in the studio. Coxsone said it was actually him who actually helped to give the Scatterlights their name. and so on. And you had people like Jackie Mittoo, who was there after, say, 65, the organist and sometimes pianist as well. In actual fact, Jackie Mittoo was there, you know, rehearsing artists. And Jackie Mittoo was so steeped in music. I mean, he could read music. His mother taught him how to play piano when he was only 4 years of age, and he would go to Studio One and do so many things there. In actual fact, according to historians and scholars, and according to legend, it's actually Jackie Mittoo changed the beats from rock steady to reggae, because earlier it was R&B, mento, but mento, which was a calypso thing, which was inspired by Afro-Cuban music and then Trinidadian music, of course. And then the Jamaicans twisted it around and used it as their own thing into mento, which was really popular in the rural towns, from people like the poorer classes of people in Jamaica, and so they're really the ones who created mento using rumba boxes and so on. And then out of that, in those days, Coxsone Dodd wasn't really doing anything, but he was mostly on the sound system. So those early recordings in the mento, Coxsone would have played one or two of them on his sound system. And in those days, the producers of mento were people like Dada Tarare. He was one of the prominent producers of the style. We had people like Laurel Aitken recording that style. Yeah, people like Lord Tanamo recording that style. Lord Creator, who came from Trinidad, was brought over to Jamaica, was recording that style as well. Recorded for Randy Chin in the early days, and then he recorded for Studio One in the 1960s. And before I forget, I don't think they did. I would say maybe 70%, 60 to 70% of artists who have ever existed in that time have recorded at Studio One. If they never started there, they went there eventually. But they had, I mean, you could count them more or less. Well, I don't say in one hand, but there's more than recorded there that have not recorded there. Jimmy Cliff didn't record there. Desmond Dekker didn't record there, and one or two others. But majority of the artists, when I say majority, I'll say more than 50% of the artists, and there's thousands of artists, have recorded at Studio One in those days. I'm not talking in modern times, but in the golden period of the 60s and the 70s and the early part of the 80s, majority of those artists went to work with Coxsone Dodd at Studio One, number 13 Brentford Road, now called Studio One Boulevard, because of the great impact that the label and Coxsone Dodd himself has had around the world. And in actual fact, when it was called Studio One Boulevard, when it was named that around the time just before he passed away in 2004. It's such a shame that he never really lived too long to see the direction and where his studio was going and the legacy. I mean, Coxsone knew that he was big, and he's been rewarded many times, but it would have been nice if it lived a bit longer to see that, to live it out some more, that it was now renamed Studio One Boulevard. I mean, the list of people who've recorded for Studio One is endless. It's as long as anyone's arm. I'm not going to list them now, but the impact the likes of Jackie Mittoo made, because Rocksteady was prominent in 67, and then by 68 there was a new beat called reggae. Some say that it was actually Larry Alvin and Alvin Leslie's recording of Nanny Goat in 1968 at Studio One, produced by the great Coxsone Dodd, which was the first reggae song, because Jackie Mittoo, obviously being at Studio One, played on it. And he shifted the organ patterns out of a slower, more refined rocksteady beat into a more jerkier reggae sound, and so on. I mean, some of the bands that worked, some of the backing bands that worked at Studio One, initially it was Clue J and the Blues Blasters. Clue J was a great bass player. In actual fact, the band was Ernie Wranglin's band, but Ernie Wranglin had so much work around Jamaica and certain parts of the Caribbean that he was able to juggle touring as well as leading a band. Of course, Ernest Wranglin is a great guitarist, still with us. And so what he did, he gave his friend, who was part of the band, Cluett Johnson, but better known as Clue J, the honour of leading a band. And so when Clue J was leading a band, they backed some of the early recordings, like I mentioned before. Some of those early recordings from the late 50s, early 60s. They worked in it. Some of the very, very first ska numbers and pre-ska numbers. I call it proto-ska, just before ska came in. So you're talking 60, 61. They also done solo work for Coxsone as well. They done solo work as well. I believe they also recorded for Duke Reid as well. It wasn't solely Coxsone Dodd, but those were the main producers. Drew Creed at that time, Coxsone as well, King Edwards as well, and one or two others. They were, and then after that they kind of morphed into the Scatolites. Some of the members, Roland Alfonso, for example, was part of the Clue J and his Blue Blasters band. So when they kind of demised, they kind of moved. Some of the members went from the Clue J band into the Scatolites. Tommy McCook, Roland Alfonso, both saxophonists. You had the great Don Drummond. I don't believe he recorded for with the Clue J, but he came for Alpha. And then you had people like, of course, Slater and Jackie too. You had Looney Nib and drums. You had so many other musicians. The great Lester Sterling, the only surviving member from those original Scatolites members, still with us today. Of course, the great, Lester Sterling could play trumpet and can play sax as well. Krypton, that's why they call him Mr. Versatile, because he's able to play a few instruments and plays it well, even to this day. He's still looking well for his age. He's in his 80s. I can't forget people like Montel Alexander, the great pianist. He was a child prodigy in those early days. He recorded at Studio One as well. Still with us at Montel Alexander. I believe he's in America. He tours around the world and he still plays piano to a high level as well. And see, these are just some of the earliest musicians that I'm kind of like, roll calling right now. But we say thanks to Sir Coxsone Dodd for setting Studio One up. Another time we're going to do some more on Coxsone Dodd. And we're going to speak some more. We're going to go more in depth if we can, if it can possible. If it's at all possible, we'll try and speak to Morna later. She told me a lot of things that are not true. A lot of things that the media twisted, and because it's her father, you got to listen to her. She's coming with the truths, whereas the media are twisting things and fabricating things and telling a lot of lies. Or not only just Coxsone, but some of the greats of reggae. So it's very important that you watch what you read and you listen carefully. You don't just take things on face value, but get it from the horse's mouth. And I'm in a privileged position where I know them now, and I know a lot of the artists from and some of the musicians, and I'm able to go firsthand and get the information from them. So I want to thank you so much for your listening time. And we'll say, big up your souls. And once again, we honour you, Sir Coxsone Dodd. Thanks for this opportunity. And we'll speak some more very, very soon. Bye for now. Bless up.